Well, good morning, good morning. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today we're going to take a look at the United Food and Commercial Workers Labor Union. This is a good one. This one was started in June of 1979, and it has a rich history even though it hasn't been out as long as the others. But even so, it is a good union, and it does have a little bit of scandal to it, but that just makes it more interesting for sure. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. It says the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union, also known as UFCW, is a labor union representing approximately 1.3 million workers in the United States and Canada in industries including retail, meatpacking, food processing and manufacturing, hospitality, agriculture, cannabis, chemical trades, security, textile, and healthcare. UFCW is affiliated with the Canadian Labour Congress and the AFL-CIO. It disaffiliated from the AFL-CIO in 2005, but reaffiliated in 2013. I'm noticing that unions do that. They affiliate, then they deaffiliate, and things like that. It says UFCW is also affiliated to UNI, Global Union, and IUF. It goes on to say the UFCW was created through the merger of the Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen of North America, AMC, Union, and Retail Clerks International Union, RCIU, following the new union's founding convention in June 1979. William H. Wynn, president of the RCIU and one of the designers of the merger, became president of UFCW at the time of its founding. The merger created the largest union affiliated with the AFL-CIO. The UFCW continued to expand both by organizing and merging with several smaller unions between 1980 and 1998. In 1980, the Barbers, Beauticians, and Allied Industries International Association merged with UFCW, followed a year later by the United Retail Workers Union, now Local 881. The UFCW held its first regular international convention in Montreal, Canada in 1983. The Insurance Workers International Union also that year voted to have their 15,000 members join the UFCW. In 1986, the Canadian Brewery Workers Union merged with the UFCW. However, it was also during this time period that the UFCW leadership did not support the Austin, Minnesota Meatpackers Local P-9 in its contract dispute with the Hormel Foods Corporation. This was known as the 1985-1986 Hormel strike. The UFCW ultimately struck a deal with Hormel management, seized control of Local P-9, and removed the local union leaders, actions that dealt a blow to the credibility of the UFCW in the eyes of others in the larger labor movement, which I don't blame them for that, because I think to do a takeover is kind of shady. This dispute was the subject of the award-winning documentary American Dream. I've never seen it, but it might be interesting to see. It says here, in 1991, the 5,000 members of the Independent Food Handlers and Warehouse Employees Union in Rhode Island and Massachusetts merged with the UFCW to form Local 791, bringing about the largest addition to the UFCW since its creation in 1979. On October 1, 1993, the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union and their 100,000 members merged with the UFCW, becoming the RWDSW District Council of the UFCW. A lot of abbreviations, that's for sure. In 1994, Douglas H. Doherty was appointed the second international president by the International Executive Board following the retirement of William Wynn. Doherty was subsequently elected to remain international president at the UFCW's fourth regular international convention in 1998 and again at the fifth regular convention in 2003. In 1994, the 15,000 member strong United Garment Workers of America also merged with the UFCW. Now, something that just popped up on my mind. So we've got all these different unions, and some of them are garment workers. Well, a lot of garment jobs have gone to other countries, which I think is a huge mistake. And that has to do, I think it's called the North American Trade Agreement. That was put into practice by Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton. And, I'm not a Democrat, but I think what he did was really wrong because it took a lot of jobs away from Americans, a lot of clothing jobs. And it sent them to Mexico, China, Vietnam, and other places. Like if you go buy a t-shirt from Walmart or Ross or even at Dillard's, like even really nice clothes as well, even designer clothes, hardly any of them are made in the United States. Or they might even, there was one I had that was made in Pakistan, another one was made in Honduras, and I'm going, why aren't these jobs in the United States? So we're talking thousands upon thousands of workers lost their jobs in the United States because of that North American trade agreement that basically shipped all these jobs overseas or to another continent. It was very disappointing, and those are people, those are Americans that needed jobs and they lost their job. Like they lost their benefits, they lost their pension, they lost their health care. So then they were forced to go into other job markets. And I just think that's really cruel to do that, to take away jobs from America and from American workers. So these garment workers, I just wonder how big of a loss they experience. So if you are in one of these unions that I'm talking about and you've seen how some laws were passed that affected your job and your job went overseas, please message me. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear your story and maybe have you on my podcast, because I think the more people are aware of how job loss affects our country, especially when jobs go to other countries, I think more of America would wake up to the problem when sometimes the federal government tries to intervene or acts like they're intervening, but then they're really just in a way punishing the American people and taking our jobs, which is really sad because that should not be happening with the federal government. Like when the federal government passes something into legislation or law, it should not affect us like that. We should not have financial losses like that. If your government really cares about you and cares about the citizens, they're not going to ship jobs overseas. They're just not going to do it. But anyway, that's just a tangent, but that's what that made me think of with garment workers and retailers and things like that. So it goes on to say, a year later, the 15,000-member textile workers and the 15,000-member distillery workers unions merged with the UFCW, forming respectively the UFCW Textile and Garment Council and the UFCW's Distillery, Wine, and Allied Workers Division. In 1996, the 40,000 members of the International Chemical Workers Union merged with the UFCW to form the International Chemical Workers Union Council of the UFCW. A year later, the Canadian Union of Restaurant and Related Employees merged with the UFCW, and the following year, both the United Representatives Guild Inc. and the Production Service and Sales District Council merged with the UFCW. In 2003, 80,000 members of the UFCW across the country went on strike to protect their wages and benefit packages. I don't blame them for that. In 2004, following the retirement of Doherty, Joseph T. Hansen was appointed by unanimous vote of the UFCW International Executive Board to be the third international president of the UFCW. He was elected for 2 consecutive terms as international president by delegates to the UFCW's regular international conventions in 2008 and 2013. In 2005, Hansen announced the UFCW was leaving the AFL-CIO and joined 6 other unions, the Teamsters, SEIU, Unite Here, Laborers, United Farm Workers and Carpenters, in creating a new labor federation, the Change to Win Federation. On August 8, 2013, the UFCW announced it was changing its affiliation back to AFL-CIO. On December 15, 2014, Anthony Mark Perrone was appointed the 4th International President of the UFCW by the International Executive Board following the retirement of Hansen. And then it goes on to activity, and the first one is Canadian agriculture, and then the next part of this is going to be about medical cannabis and hemp division. So we'll start with the Canadian agriculture. It says the UFCW was appointed, I take that back. The UFCW has attempted to organize agricultural workers in Ontario, Canada since 1995, when the provincial government passed legislation prohibiting those workers from joining unions. That's a problem. In 2001, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in favor of UFCW Canada in the case of Dunmore versus Ontario. In the ruling, the court held that the Ontario government violated the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I agree with that, by denying agricultural workers unionization rights under the Ontario labor law, as it had infringed on those workers' freedom of association. That's very true. In 2004, UFCW Canada and the National Union of Public and General Employees, also known as NUPGE, signed a formal organizing protocol recognizing the UFCW as the union with primary jurisdiction for organizing agricultural workers in Canada and agreeing to cooperate on joint organizing and advocacy campaigns. This next section is Medical Cannabis and Hemp Division. And I'm going to take a side note with this and talk about what's going on in Oklahoma with this. So it says here, the cannabis industry was originally targeted for union organizing by UFCW Local 5 Special Operations Director Dan Rush in 2010. After some initial success, Rush has since been serving federal prison time for cheating the union for personal gain by taking bribes from employers, and both the local and international unions have disowned him. In 2010, Rush brokered a deal in which some California medical marijuana business owners voted to become UFCW Local 5 members in return for union endorsement of marijuana law reform. Recognized shops in Oakland include Richard Lee's Oaksterdam University, Oaksterdam Gift Shop, Blue Sky Coffee Shop Dispensary, and the Bulldog Coffee Shop, in AMCD Dispensaries, Inc., and the Patient ID Center. Soon after, the workers at Medicone Farms of California joined the union. Between May 2010 and June 2011, more California business owners signed a neutrality agreement with UFCW, including Humboldt Bay Wellness Center and 707 Cannabis College in the Emerald Triangle of the California North Coast. The International Union realized that the industry consisted of the union's core industries, retail pharmacy and healthcare, agriculture, food processing, and textiles with hemp. Few of these top-down recognitions or neutrality agreements resulted in competitive contracts for cannabis workers in California. Only a handful of dispensaries in California have dues-paying members. In September 2011, some of Colorado's industry associations of legally compliant marijuana sellers, representing 8,000 people, voted to join the UFCW. The labor union, which traditionally bargains mostly with grocery and meatpacking companies, solidified the national division that could represent cannabis workers nationwide. On September 17, 2015, the Office of the United States Attorney for the Northern District of California announced that a federal grand jury had indicted Rush on a variety of counts on the basis of his cannabis-related union activities. He pled guilty in 2017 and served 37 months in federal prison. I bet he regrets doing what he did. Okay, so in regards to Oklahoma, what I wanted to mention is that we've kind of got a little bit of some problems going on in Oklahoma in regards to medical marijuana. And so here's the scoop. And if you are listening from other countries, please be aware that if medical marijuana is legalized in your state, your country, your city, your town, please be aware of outside companies from other countries, especially like China, that are buying up property and fields and acreages to get involved in medical marijuana. And here's why I say that. I'm from Oklahoma, and medical marijuana, we voted on it to make it legal, and I voted to make it legal because I think it's stupid for it to not be legal in the state, even though it still federally is not legal. I think it's stupid to lock people up just because of a plant. I think that's dumb. I think if you can smoke a cigarette, you can smoke medical marijuana. I wish that marijuana was legal. I don't smoke it, I don't do it, but I think it's stupid to lock people up for something like that. But anyway, so what happened was soon after, actually really quickly, after medical marijuana was made legal in the state of Oklahoma, there were these international companies from China, really wealthy ones, really shady ones, that were buying up fields and farms out in the boonies of Oklahoma. Like, they were buying up property and acreages in towns I'd never heard of. Because Oklahoma, even though we are kind of a medium-sized state, there are so many towns in Oklahoma that I've never heard of, and I didn't know they existed because they're small farming communities. They may have been larger back in the day, but whenever highways and interstate highways were built, I think in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it took away a lot of business from those small towns, because a lot of these small towns, their main access roads, if there was a highway, was Route 66. So when these other highways were built, post World War II, a lot of these towns began to shrink up. And also when, some of these towns, they also shrank way back in the day, even before then. If they were originally railroad towns, meaning the railroad went through, but then once Route 66 was built, it pulled consumers and customers away from those towns, and then these towns shrunk even more when the interstates were built. So there are a lot of these towns that, yes, I'm born and raised from Oklahoma, but a lot of these towns I've never heard of. And most of the time, the only reason I hear of these small towns is if there's a scandal, or if there's a tornado on the ground and we're watching the news to see if it's coming near us. We get to see the direction of the storm, and the weatherman lists all these towns and what time the storm is going to hit those towns. That's usually when I learn about my state, is when a tornado is on the ground. But here's the thing, what I want to make you aware of. We are having a problem with Chinese companies buying up farmland out here, and they're setting up shop to grow medical marijuana, but it looks like a compound. Because what's happening is these Chinese companies are bringing in slave labor. Like, they have workers that are not allowed to leave the compound. And that's going on here in Oklahoma. And the way that I found out was some of these farmers had sold their property, and I truly believe they did not know. And here's why I'm 99% sure they did not know who they were truly selling to. Because here's the thing. Number one, farmers are very loyal to the United States. They just are. They are true blue people. They bleed red. They're true blue. They're really loyal to the United States. They look out for their neighbor, and they would not willingly and knowingly sell to an international company, especially the Chinese. That's just not going to happen. That's just how they operate. Like, they really would prefer to sell to people that are in the United States and also help out their neighbor. So what happened is, some of these farmers sold their property, whether they were retired or someone passed away, or maybe they just don't want to be in farming anymore. And so they sold their property. And so then the new owners came in, and they were using different types of farming equipment than these farmers had ever seen before, because it kind of depends on what you're farming. So, like, if you're farming corn, that's going to be different than cotton. If you're growing cotton, that's going to be different than, having an apple orchard, things like that. So they noticed that there was kind of this different, plant being grown, and they're farming it differently, and it was chain link fences put up everywhere. We don't have that kind of stuff out here in Oklahoma. Like, we have lots of land out here. We're known for being, our land is known for being flat. That doesn't mean we don't have little mountains and things like that and waterfalls, but predominantly, Oklahoma is very flat. Not as flat as Kansas, but pretty close. And, we just don't have, I can't think of any place that has chain link fences like this. Well, that was the first clue that something was going on that wasn't right. So it was this Chinese company built a compound on the property that they purchased from this farmer, but the farmer did not know the company was Chinese. And here's why. A lot of these companies, when they're trying to buy up property, they're going through a middleman. And I've come across this before in times past. And how they're getting away with it is, let's say, for example, you are a Chinese company and you don't want people to know who you really are. Because, there's some people in the United States, they're probably not going to have a high opinion of you, and they're not going to have a high opinion of your practices because you have slave labor and you treat people like they're cattle. So if you're operating as a not so nice Chinese company, you're going to go through a middleman, also known as a holding company. There are holding companies. These types of holding companies, I've noticed, are predominantly located up in the northeastern states of the United States. It's more to do with brokerage firms, stock holding, things of that. And it is, how do I word this? It is legal for what this holding company is doing, but it's shady and it's immoral. Because what this holding company is doing is it's just trying to make a quick buck. It doesn't really care about people. And I say a holding company. There are many holding companies in the United States. they're basically just a money pit. And I don't mean that in a positive way. It is a negative term to be called a money pit because it really devalues human life. Because you can't tell me these holding companies don't know the shadiness of their client. They just don't care who they're doing business with as long as they make their pound of flesh, so to speak, on this. So these Chinese companies specifically look for financial firms that are called holding companies. They basically have the holding company act like the buyer. And then the holding company, technically they do purchase the property from the farmer, and they make it seem like the farmer is, selling to an American, and technically they are. But what the farmer doesn't know is that holding company is just a middleman, and then that holding company is going to sell that property immediately to this Chinese company. And the Chinese company comes over here to the United States, comes into Oklahoma, sets up a compound with chain link fences, and brings in slave labor. And we have seen it. People talk about it, and they're shocked by it. Absolutely shocked. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. China is still doing this? I mean, I know that they have slave labor in their country because they're communist. But I'm just stunned that they're still doing this outside of their country because they were doing this in the Bahamas years ago. I know some people that went to the Bahamas for a vacation. And the Bahamas, they were building a new hotel or a resort or something. And the people that I know, they were down there island hopping, and they saw that this construction was going on. And so they asked the locals what's being built there, and they said that this guy, I guess he got permission from the government in the Bahamas to build a hotel, but he outsourced the labor to a Chinese company, and this Chinese company brought in slave labor, literally. And they set up a compound just like they're doing here in Oklahoma. They set up a chain link fence compound, and they had Chinese workers there that were not allowed to leave the compound. And eventually the project fell through. But I was so disappointed in the government of the Bahamas. Like, how could they be okay with slave labor like that? I mean, how could they be okay with authorizing a business deal, with the Chinese when they know what they do? They know what they're like. And not every Chinese company is bad. I'm not saying that. But some of them, when they're really bad, they're bad like this. And it's unfortunately very common. It is very common. So we have some of that going on here in Oklahoma. And the thing is that you're not going to see it unless you drive out in the boonies and you know where it is. Because it's kind of like with these Chinese companies, they try and find towns and states that nobody's going to look or notice. Or they think that people there are predominantly stupid. Well, we're not stupid in Oklahoma. We are pretty smart, and we are very loyal to our neighbors, and we're very loyal to the United States. And we notice when there's shady stuff going on, big time. Okay, so I took a moment to look up holding company definition on Google, so that way I could give you a clearer picture of what exactly I'm talking about, because for many years I did not know what these were. I had never heard of them. So I'm going to read you, of what exactly a holding company is. And probably in a second podcast. Sorry, I just drank a bunch of coffee. So in a second podcast or episode, I'll probably go over the structure and the foundations of a holding company. But here is the basic definition of a holding company, and why other companies outside of the United States are able to get away with what they're doing. I'm trying to be nice about, which is why I'm hesitating. I'm kind of like thinking of how to say this appropriately and positively and concisely so that way I don't get sued. So the definition of a holding company is this. A holding company is a company whose primary business is holding a controlling interest in the securities of other companies. A holding company usually does not produce goods or services itself. Its purpose is to own shares of other companies to form a corporate group. So I'll give another example of where I came across this. Years ago, in my hometown, Oklahoma, there was a big shopping center that was built. Well, it was big to us, but it's probably small compared to other places, but it was the big to-do when this thing got built. And I noticed that, they built this shopping center, this shopping strip, I should say. It was a strip. And, we had a Target, a Hobby Lobby, and we still do. And we have a Hallmark. And, but there were other spots available for retailers. And, there's this huge sign. And, it's closer to the roadside, if that makes sense. It displays like what all businesses are there that you can go shopping at. They had some vacancies. And I noticed the sign, it said, basically, what is it, like 5,000 square feet? I'm making something up. This square footage, if you want to lease, call this number. This is the company. Well, I noticed the company name was a strange name. It was a holding company. I was like, what's a holding company? And so I looked it up, and I actually called them, and they never returned my call because they did not want to talk to me. But I looked them up, and this holding company was basically a firm that was the middleman for Chinese companies to buy land and property in Oklahoma. And so what was happening was, like, if you were, let's say, for example, because I'm a licensed insurance agent in the state of Oklahoma, let's say I want to have my own business at a strip mall center, at a shopping center, and I want to rent or lease that space. On the surface, it looks like you're renting locally, or you're renting from someone in your town or in your state. But technically, you're renting from a Chinese company going through a holding company. So when Trump said the Chinese are very, he didn't say cutthroat, but he said that they are very serious business people, he wasn't kidding. And he said that the Chinese are buying up a lot of stuff in the United States. He wasn't kidding. And this was way before he became president that he said this. So, just be cautious if you are selling to a holding company, because I guarantee you have no idea who you are doing business with. And more than likely, it could very well be the Chinese, because the Chinese, the way that they are manipulating our currency and our market is by going through American-based holding companies that are not acting in a very American way. And maybe I'll, in a later episode, I'll go over the different holding companies that are in the United States. But the ones that have been affecting Oklahoma are holding companies that are from up north and northeast. And I found that very interesting because, states in the central part of the United States and the southern states, if we knew about this stuff that was going on, we would not sell our property to these people. We just would not. Because we want to keep things in America, like made in the USA, for the USA, that kind of thing. And we would rather sell to someone that is an American and, wants to provide for their family. The Chinese, they're not providing for their families like we do here. The Chinese believe in slave labor. The majority of the population in China is slave labor. And it's very difficult to get out of that slave labor. So just FYI, that's kind of a side note with that and what's happening here in Oklahoma. And I guarantee you it's probably happening in Kansas and, I would think Missouri, or Arkansas, like the states that are considered stupid, but we're not. There are so many people in the United States and outside the United States that they have figured out which states they think are hick states and that we're not intelligent. And that's where they buy up this land, and they go through the back door. They go through the back door every single time because they don't have the guts to say, hey, I'm a Chinese business. I practice slave labor, and I want to purchase your land. They don't have the guts or the nerve to just be honest about it. They're very dishonest people, these Chinese companies that behave this way. But here's the thing. You've got financial firms and business firms up north that they just want the money. They value currency more than they do human life. So just FYI, be aware of that. And it definitely should open your eyes to what's been going on, because there's so many things that I didn't know until I looked it up. It's kind of like one of those things, you're driving by and you see something kind of funny, kind of fishy, doesn't make sense. And that's when I start looking up things and researching, and then I go, oh, this is going on in our country? It's very concerning to me because I don't like to experience any kind of job loss in our country. I think that's very devastating to our country, and unfortunately, we have other countries, specifically like China, that are manipulating our currency and our job market, and they're doing it through a legal way, but it's not moral, and it's not right. And I think if more Americans were aware of this, I think they would not sell to these holding companies. And also, if you're listening in another country, please share this podcast with everybody that you know, just in case the Chinese are doing this same cruel thing in your country. Because if you have rural property, like undeveloped land in your country, and if it's super cheap and it on the surface it looks like property that nobody wants, you can't grow anything on it, be very suspicious if an outsider wants to buy it. And they don't really want to tell you who they're selling it to or who you're really doing business with. Please be aware and conscious of that. Like, I could easily see the Chinese doing that in Canada. Easily, because Canada is huge. You guys have a lot of land up there, but you don't have a huge population. And, these bad Chinese companies, they love to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. Especially when you're not looking and your guard is down and you don't know what they're really up to. It kind of reminds me of like when you're taking out a loan from like a shady bank and you don't realize that something is wrong with the loan until afterwards and you see the small print, like the really fine print. And you go, oh, if I had only known. So this episode of this podcast is me letting you know about the fine print. Because it needs to be known. So, but anyway, let's get back to this union. So let's go on to the next section. And the next section is work stoppages and conflict with corporations. So it says 2003 California grocery strike. And this comes from an article entitled Southern California Supermarket Strike 2003 to 2004. It says on October 11th, 2003, the UFCW declared a strike on Vons, which is owned by Safeway, which is a grocery store, in Southern California because of company proposed changes to the new labor contract. These changes included cuts in health care and pension benefits, that's not cool, and the creation of a two-tier system in which new workers would be paid on a different schedule than existing workers, and that to me is suspicious right there. Because why would you want to pay people differently? I mean, that just makes it a nightmare for HR and for your payroll department. These changes were proposed due to competition from non-union retailers like Walmart. Well, you can't compare yourself to Walmart. I mean, Walmart is Walmart. I mean, just don't even bother comparing yourself with Walmart. The day following the strike, Albertsons and Ralph's, owned by Kroger, locked out their Southern California employees. That's not cool. The strike ended on February 26, 2004, when the UFCW and affected companies reached an agreement on a new contract. Union employees voted to end the strike, and many employees cited financial difficulties as a reason for ratifying the agreement. The new labor contract included concessions granted by the chains relating to current employee benefits and wages, and concessions granted by the union relating to creating two tiers of employees and cutting benefits overall. The next section is entitled Smithfield Foods. It says, during the 1990s and 2000s, the UFCW was embroiled in a dispute with non-unionized meat processing company Smithfield Foods. The UFCW had repeatedly attempted to organize the company's Bladen County, North Carolina meatpacking plant, but Smithfield Foods resisted this organizing. In 2007, Smithfield filed a federal lawsuit against the UFCW citing the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, also known as RICO, claiming that the union orchestrated a public smear campaign to hurt Smithfield's business as a method of extorting the company. In the media, a Smithfield official cited the lawsuit as necessary by claiming that the company was under attack, while union officials responded by calling the lawsuit an attack on democracy and free speech. In October 2008, the UFCW and Smithfield reached an agreement under which the union agreed to suspend its boycott campaign in return for the company dropping its RICO lawsuit and allowing another election. On December 10th and 11th, workers at the plant voted 2,041 to 1,879 in favor of joining the UFCW, bringing the 15-year fight to an end. That is a long time to fight. Long time. The next little segment is about Walmart. It says Walmart, a non-unionized company, has repeatedly been accused by the UFCW of treating its workers poorly and driving down employment standards. The UFCW has repeatedly attempted to organize the chain, but these attempts have been unsuccessful in the United States. In Canada, the UFCW managed to win union recognition at 2 Walmart stores in Quebec and one in, I think it's Saskatchewan. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Walmart closed the, I think it's Jonquière, I'm not sure, or Crere, I don't know, store, and workers at St. Hyacinthe, and workers in St. Hyacinthe voted to decertify UFCW in 2011. The union has also applied for recognition at a dozen other Walmarts and had won a contract at the Walmart store in, I'm not sure I pronounced the town, but it's in Quebec, Canada. After a couple years of unsuccessful negotiations between the union and Walmart, the workers at the store decided to leave the union. Oh, that's sad. Let's see. The last remaining unionized Walmart in North America was located in Weyburn, whatever that name is. I can't pronounce it. Walmart successfully repealed, I think it's repelled an attempted UFCW unionization campaign there in August 2013 when the Supreme Court of Canada dismissed the union's attempt to compel Walmart to reach a collective agreement with it. Workers at the Weyburn store then voted 51-5 to decertify the union. In April 2005, as part of a volley of accusatory websites created by Walmart and the UFCW, the union created Wake Up Walmart, a U.S.-based website and campaign with the stated goal of reforming Walmart's business practices. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not surprised at all that failed in Canada because, first of all, Canada is a socialized country. Even if they say they're not, they are. And the reason why they are is because they have socialized medicine. And on a side note with that, socialized medicine has been a huge problem for Canadians because there are so many Canadians that come across the border into Michigan and other states that border Canada to get health care. Because their socialized medicine does not work, and they basically put them on waiting lists to die. So there have been people from Canada that have had to sell their homes, sell up everything, and come to the United States to get proper health care because they can't get it in Canada. The only reason why you would want socialized medicine is if you are healthy and you hardly ever have any problems. But the moment you get sick, that's when you start to have serious problems because the government healthcare system is not going to help you. You're not going to get the healthcare that you need or deserve or what you paid for. Okay, secondly, in regards to Walmart, Walmart is a capitalist company. Most of our companies here in the United States are capitalist, and they should be, because under capitalism, you can make as much money as you want. And you can employ more people, you can provide better benefits, things like that. It works so much better than being in a socialized country or a fascist country or a communist country like China. They're bad. They're communist. But see, here's the thing. The reason why Walmart is so successful is that it is able to provide large amounts of goods for a fraction of the price. And so the workers, they're not going to be making $20 to $25 an hour. That's just not how it is in grocery stores. I've worked at a grocery store, and it's just kind of the norm for you to make minimum, which should be $15 an hour. That's what I wish, but it's just the norm that if you work at a grocery store, unless you're in management, you're not going to be making a lot of money. And the reason for that is because it provides savings to the customer. So if Walmart becomes unionized, they're not going to be able to brag about their rollback prices anymore. Because the only way you're going to get the workers to have way better wages and way better benefits and way better health care is to raise the prices on all the goods that are sold in Walmart. And I guarantee you, Walmart is not going to be okay with that because they'll probably have to close a lot of stores because people are not going to pay high prices at a Walmart. They're just not. Like, I wouldn't. I'd be like, why am I paying that? I can go to Dollar Tree or Dollar General. It may not be the brand I necessarily like, but I don't want to pay those prices. That's just how it is. Walmart is known for being able to supply and provide large amounts of goods for a fraction of the price. But the cost of that is their workers are not going to be paid super well. And that's not a diss on Walmart. I mean, I think any grocery store is not going to pay the average worker there, they're not going to pay them very much more than minimum wage. And the best way to get around that, if I was a worker at a grocery store, I would look into trying to get into management. Because if you can get into management, even an assistant store manager, you can move your way up to corporate. And then you can start making really good money at a corporate job, because grocery store wages are not the same as corporate job wages. Like, that's just how it is. Because you have to look at, okay, what is this job worth, like, within the market? Like, that's how, I think I've said this before in a previous podcast. The way that I go in for interviews and I negotiate the pay rate is I look at, okay, what job did I apply to or for? And then what is the industry standard within the United States? And what is the standard, the gross income standard within my state and my area? And I always ask for more. Because you start high just in case the employer lowballs you, which I can't stand. It's such a slap in the face, which just makes me want to raise my pay rate even more and be ridiculously expensive. Because I know that if they're going to lowball me, they're probably not worth working for anyway, because that just irritates me. Because I just look at them like, I know my facial expression is like, really, would you work for that? Probably not. Don't insult me. But you have to take into consideration what industry you're working in, and also the economy that you're in for that. So good luck trying to get Walmart to be unionized. If they went unionized, I don't know what would happen. I mean, I think it would be very difficult. Okay, so the next section is called Bashaw's. It says in 2007, Bashaw's filed a lawsuit, and by the way, that's a supermarket. Bashaw's filed a lawsuit against UFCW with the Supreme Court of Arizona. The lawsuit accused the UFCW and the union's operatives, including its false front organization, Hungry for Respect, of defamation and intentionally interfering with the grocer's operations to extort an agreement for union representation. The company also named Radio Campesina, I think is how you pronounce it, a project of the United Farm Workers Union founded by Cesar Chavez. Oh, that's creepy. Anything found by Cesar Chavez is probably not the best thing to go with. He's a different character. We'll talk about him later. Councilman Michael Nowalski and Reverend Trina Zell as defendants. The next section is talking about the 2016 Jim Beam strike. In October 2016, about 250 workers for Beam Suntory, the producer of the whiskey bourbon brand Jim Beam, went on strike over long working hours and the hiring of temporary workers in lieu of permanent full-time workers at 2 distillery facilities in Kentucky. Now that I don't blame them for, because I think if the employer wanted to really want what is best for their workers, they would just make people full-time workers that are already there and promote them. They wouldn't hire all these temporary workers. Nothing against temporary workers. I've been a temporary worker in times past. But if an employer really cares about its employees, then it's not going to lowball or underscore their current employees, because that's just really rude and disrespectful. It says here the strike ended after about a week with a new labor contract that included a cap on the number of temporary workers and a commitment from the company to hire more full-time employees. Amen. I agree with that. If you're going to hire somebody, just make them full-time. Just make them full-time. That's the proper thing to do. The next section is about the 2019 Stop and Shop strike. The 2019 Stop and Shop strike began on April 11, 2019, when approximately 31,000 workers represented by the UFCW walked off the job and began picketing Stop and Shop locations in the states of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. The strike was in response to the company not agreeing, after extensive negotiations, to a contract which did not reduce employee pay and benefits. The strike ended 11 days later on April 21st. The tentative agreement preserved health and pension benefits and raised employee pay. Amen. That is good. The next section, it doesn't mention very much. It's called Heaven Hill, and it just has one line. It says, in September 2021, about 420 members of the UFCW Local 23D went on strike at the Heaven Hill Bourbon Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, and that's all it says about that. The next section is about political activities. It says, in the United States, the The UFCW's Political Action Committee spent a little over $11 million in the 2014 election cycle, 99% of which went to Democratic candidates and 1% went to Republican candidates. I completely, again, disagree with sending any kind of funds to either party. They should not be doing that. That's $11 million that could have been used to help its members directly. Not going towards a candidate, but directly help the members, because that's membership money. So that's just my personal opinion. It says UFCW's PAC, or PAC, spent $673,309 in independent expenditures promoting the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and contributed $1.8 million to Democratic federal candidates in 2008 and $1.7 million to Democratic congressional candidates in 2010. Again, I disagree with that. That needs to be used for the members, not for politics. In early 2011, the Obama administration granted waivers to 28 different UFCW healthcare plans, allowing them to avoid full compliance with the Affordable Care Act for a year. Now, to me, that is absolutely shady, because that tells me right there that the Affordable Care Act was not a good act to pass at all. And here's another thing. If the president is showing favoritism to unions, then that means that anybody that's not a part of those unions is totally being dissed. And so your rights are being overlooked, whether you are a union member or not. It's not right for any president to show favoritism to a union over the rest of the workers of the United States of America. See, because here's the thing. That Affordable Care Act law was horrible for everybody. It was so bad that government officials and senators, congressmen, anybody working in a federal role, they squealed like pigs because they did not want that health care law to affect their health care benefits. So a special provision was written for anyone in a federal government role that they would not lose their health insurance, but the rest of the United States would. So here we see that there are some more exceptions, and this is in regards to the health care plans for this particular union, but even after a year, they were forced to look at other health insurance products, which is sad because that affects their benefits. And I wish their union, it doesn't say it here, but I wish their union had called the president out on that and his administration, because the union is supposed to be there to help protect the health care, the benefits, and the pensions of its workers. And I kind of feel like they didn't do a good enough job of protecting them. They only protected them for a year. That's really sad. So I'm very disappointed in that. The next section is international presidents. So these are people that held a board position, which I don't really care about. And it just goes through a list. And then it goes through Canadian directors. I'm not going to mess with that because if you want to read it, it just lists all these different names and the year that they were in office. The next section is the Landrum-Griffin Act violations, and it says here the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act of 1959, also known as LMRDA, or the Landrum-Griffin Act, is a United States labor law that regulates labor unions' internal affairs and their officials' relationships with employers. On October 22, 2013, the Office of Labor Management Standards, also known as OLMS, of the United States Department of Labor, accepted a voluntary compliance agreement with the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 5, concerning the challenged election of officers conducted on September 4, 2012, as well as the March 22, 2013 rerun election ordered by the International Union. The Union agreed to conduct a new election, including new nominations for the offices of President, Secretary-Treasurer, Recorder, and Vice Presidents 1 through 31 under OLMS supervision. The investigation of the challenged election disclosed that union resources were used when the UFCW International President sent a campaign letter to various UFCW officers soliciting contributions, and his executive assistant, obtained the recipient's addresses while on union time. The agreement follows an investigation by the OLMS San Francisco-Seattle District Office. A UFCW member in Southern California filed a complaint in 2013 with the OLMS against former UFCW 1036 trustees for illegally transferring $100,000 from the local union 1036 to UFCW International in a violation of Section 303 of the LMRDA. Well, good for them. File it, for sure. A statement reported, quote, The investigation disclosed that on February 26, 2009, the trustee, Sean Barclay, appointed by the International UFCW to manage the affairs of the Local 1036, transferred $100,000 of the local's monies to the International UFCW. It says here, the UFCW International agreed that the transfer was unlawful and should not have occurred. Funds were returned to the appropriate local unions following the investigation by the Department of Labor, Office of Labor Management Standards. And then it goes on, there's a See Also segment that lists a couple different things, like the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the meat industry in the United States. And then it lists a couple different locals, like Local 832, Local 1776, and then workers' rights in meatpacking industry. That would be very interesting to read because back in the day, the meatpacking industry, and I mean like at the turn of the century, it was pretty grotesque what was happening in the meat packaging industry. And there's a book, I forget the name of it. I'll look it up, but there's a book that came out before the USDA was founded. There's something else that happened. There were really bad practices that were going on in the meat packing industry at the turn of the century, and this book helped to bring about new regulations regarding meat packing and things like that. And it's just one of those things, when you have an industry, you still need safety standards regardless of what the industry is. It doesn't matter if it's a gross industry. I'm sure slaughtering animals and meat packing is not the most pleasant job. But if you want people to eat meat, you've got to have a meat packing industry. However, even though the nature of the job can be kind of gruesome because of what it does, you still need safety procedures and protocols in place. And so I'll try and see if I can find that book and remember what the name of it is and let you know what that is, and you should read it because it's really good. I just can't think of the name because it's been several years since I read it. But anyway, that is it for today's lovely podcast. And again, this was discussing the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, also known as UFCW. And right below their logo, it says, "A voice for working America." I really love that phrase because American workers need a voice. And if a union can help with their voice, that is great. Because workers have rights. Regardless of what job you're in and what you do, and regardless of what union you're in, or if you're not in a union, you have workers' rights. So don't ever give up. Always be positive and look for the good in your job. Because I've had jobs where it was tough, and there were some days that were really bad, but I just tried to find the good in my job no matter what, and that helped kind of lower the slings and arrows, as they say, of tough times. So I pray that that helps you. So until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, and that you're very blessed and prosperous in everything that you do. So until next time, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.